I'm Isaac Carter, and I'm 34 years old. 5 years ago, 3 days before Thanksgiving, my phone rang at 11:47 p.m. I was in my apartment in Chicago, halfway through packing my bags for the trip home to Ohio. My mom's name lit up the screen. I remember thinking it was late for her to call. I remember the cold feeling that spread through my chest before I even answered. I had no idea those next 7 words would completely rewrite my understanding of family. Don't come home this year, Isaac. Stephen doesn't want drama. No explanation beyond that. No apology. Just a door slammed in my face after 29 years of being the invisible son. I spent that Thanksgiving alone at a diner on the South Side, watching families share meals through the window while I choked down cold mashed potatoes and tried not to break down in front of strangers. What I didn't know was that the elderly couple sitting 3 booths away would see me crying into my napkin. What I didn't know was that 5 years later, those same strangers would be standing at my wedding as my legal parents, holding the adoption papers that proved they chose me when my own blood couldn't. What I didn't know was that my biological parents would show up, uninvited to that wedding, only to hear the MC announce different names as the parents of the groom. Names that weren't theirs, names that belonged to people who actually earned the title. Before I tell you how a family of strangers became more real than the people who raised me, before I show you what happened when my mother realized she'd been legally replaced, I need you to understand something. This isn't a story about revenge. This is about what happens when you finally stop making yourself smaller for people who will never make room for you. This is about the exact moment I realized that blood doesn't make you family. Showing up does. And this is about the phone call that started it all. November 21st. 5 years ago, I was 29 years old, standing in my cramped studio apartment in Chicago's Logan Square neighborhood. The radiator was hissing, throwing off too much heat like it always did. I'd lit a cinnamon candle trying to get into the Thanksgiving spirit. My suitcase was open on the bed, half packed with clothes for the 4-day trip home to Cleveland. I'd already bought my train ticket. Non-refundable, because I'd waited too long and the cheap seats sold out fast. I was folding a sweater when my phone buzzed on the counter. Mom, I smiled without thinking. Muscle memory from a lifetime of trying to please her. Hey, Mom. I was just about to call and confirm my arrival time. Isaac. Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed. We need to talk. My hands stopped moving. That tone. I'd heard it 1,000 times growing up. It never meant anything good. Okay, what's up? Is Dad all right? Your father's fine. A pause that stretched too long. I've been thinking, and I need you to not come home this year for Thanksgiving. I actually laughed out loud. I thought she was joking, testing me, seeing if I'd argue. What? Mom, I already bought my ticket. I know, but Stephen doesn't want any drama. Rachel just found out she's pregnant again, and they don't need the stress right now. I felt my throat tighten. Drama? What drama? I haven't even talked to Stephen in months. Exactly, and let's keep it that way. Her voice went cold, clinical. You know how you get, Isaac, how I get. The words came out broken. Mom, all I did last Thanksgiving was ask why I wasn't invited to their gender reveal party. That's not drama. That's a reasonable question. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You always make everything about yourself. They wanted it to be intimate family only. You're my brother. I'm their family. I was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles went white. The candle kept burning. The radiator kept hissing. Outside my window, Chicago moved forward like nothing was happening. Isaac, I don't have time to argue about this. Stephen and Rachel don't need stress. She's pregnant. You understand, don't you? Then she hung up. No goodbye. No I love you. Just a dial tone, and the sound of my own breathing in an apartment that suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. I understood perfectly. I'd always been the acceptable loss. I need you to understand this wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the 10th time. As I sat on my bed staring at that useless train ticket, memories started flooding back. Each one a small cut that had never quite healed. When I was 14, I'd planned a birthday party for weeks. Nothing fancy. Just me and 5 friends from school going to see a movie and getting pizza after. My parents promised they'd drive us, pay for everything, make it special. The morning of my birthday, Stephen called from college. He'd failed an exam and was having what my mom called a crisis. My party was canceled on the spot. We need to drive up to Columbus and talk to your brother, my dad said, already grabbing his keys. He needs us more than you need a party right now. Isaac, you can celebrate next weekend. We never did celebrate. Nobody even mentioned it again. When I graduated from University of Illinois with a degree in computer science, I was the first person in our family to graduate with honors. I'd worked 3 part-time jobs to afford it. Slept 4 hours a night for 4 years. I walked across that stage looking for my parents in the crowd, scanning hundreds of faces for the 2 that mattered most. They weren't there. I found out later they were at a routine doctor's appointment with Rachel, Stephen's wife. She had a minor pregnancy scare that turned out to be nothing. You understand, right? Mom said when I called her, hurt and confused. Rachel thought something might be wrong with the baby. We had to be there. What about being there for me? I'd asked, my voice small. Don't be selfish, Isaac. This isn't about you. That's when I learned. Complaining made it worse. Expressing hurt made me the problem. So I stopped. I made myself smaller, quieter, easier. I thought if I just needed less, demanded less, existed less, maybe then I'd finally be enough. I was 29 years old, sitting in a Chicago apartment with a worthless train ticket, and I finally understood the truth. There was no version of small, enough that would ever make them choose me. I called my father 2 hours later. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some small, desperate part of me still believed he'd defend me. Just this once, the phone rang 6 times. I almost hung up. Dad. His voice was cautious, guarded. He already knew. Yeah, Isaac, did Mom tell you what she said? A long pause. I could hear a game playing in the background. Probably the Lions. She mentioned it. And you're okay with this? You think it's fine to just uninvite your son from Thanksgiving? Another pause. This one hurt worse than the first. You know how your mother is, Isaac. She's just trying to keep everyone happy, by excluding me. It's not like that, son. Then what is it like, Dad? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like what it's always been. Stephen and his family matter. I don't. Isaac, don't put words in my mouth. I'm not putting words anywhere. I'm asking you a direct question. Do you want me to come home for Thanksgiving? Silence. 5 seconds, 10, 15. I could hear him breathing. I could picture him in his recliner. The one he'd sat in for 20 years. Probably rubbing his temples like he did whenever a conversation got uncomfortable. I think, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. It might be better if you listen to your mother this year. Something inside me went quiet. Not angry, not sad, just empty. Okay, Dad, Isaac, don't be like this. I said okay. I hung up before he could say anything else. He didn't call back. I sat there as the sun set over Chicago, watching the light change from gold to orange to deep purple. My father had a chance to choose me, one chance to say one word in my defense. He chose silence instead, and I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. He was never in the middle. He was always on their side. I just kept pretending otherwise. Thanksgiving Day arrived cold and gray. I woke up to the sound of my upstairs neighbor's family arriving. Heavy footsteps, children's laughter echoing through the ceiling, the warm rumble of voices greeting each other. Someone was cooking something that smelled incredible. Turkey, definitely. Maybe stuffing with sage. I made instant coffee and sat by my window watching Chicago wake up to the holiday. The street below was empty except for a few cars heading somewhere. Probably to family dinners, to tables where they had a seat waiting. My phone stayed silent all morning. No calls, no texts. Not even a happy Thanksgiving from anyone in my family. Around 1 p.m. I made a mistake. I opened Instagram. Stephen had posted a photo. The whole family gathered around my parents' dining room table. Mom, Dad, Stephen, Rachel. Their 2 kids. Emma and Tyler, both under 5. Everyone was smiling like they'd just heard the world's best joke. The caption read, "Grateful for the people who matter most. Family over everything." I zoomed in on the photo, counted the place settings. 5 adults would be 6 if you counted the kids separately, but just 5 chairs. There wasn't even an empty seat where I should have been. They hadn't just uninvited me. They'd erased me, like I'd never existed. Like 29 years of being their son, their brother, meant absolutely nothing. I closed the app and stared at my ceiling. I thought about ordering Chinese food and spending the day in bed, which is exactly what the dramatic, sensitive, too much son they always accused me of being would do. But something in me refused. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of breaking me. If I was going to eat Thanksgiving dinner alone, I was going to do it somewhere with actual people, with light, with the sound of life happening around me. I grabbed my coat and went looking for a restaurant that was still open. Rosewood. Diner was a Southside institution. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floors, a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked since the 90s. More importantly, it was one of maybe 3 places in Chicago open on Thanksgiving. When I walked in, the warmth hit me immediately. The smell of roasted turkey and coffee, the soft murmur of conversation, the clink of silverware on plates. Everywhere I looked, I saw families. A table of 8 with 3 generations passing rolls and laughing. A couple in their 70s holding hands across a booth. A group that looked like college friends, probably orphaned from their own families by distance or choice, making their own tradition. The hostess gave me a look I recognized immediately. Pity. Just one tonight? Just one. She led me to a tiny 2-top wedged between the kitchen door and a massive family that had pushed 3 tables together. If I reached out my left arm, I could touch their chairs. Your server will be right with you, she said, leaving me with a laminated menu and a glass of water I didn't ask for. I sat down and tried to look like this was intentional. Like I'd chosen to be here alone. Like I was the kind of independent person who enjoyed solitary holiday meals. The family next to me was celebrating hard. An older couple at the head, probably late 60s. A middle-aged man with his wife and 2 teenage kids. A younger guy, maybe early 30s, who kept making everyone laugh with stories I couldn't quite hear. 3 generations. They passed dishes without asking. They interrupted each other the way people do when they're comfortable, when they know they're loved, even when they're annoying. I watched them from the corner of my eye and felt something crack open in my chest. This is what it's supposed to look like. When my food arrived, a perfect Thanksgiving plate with all the fixings. I couldn't taste any of it. I sat there pushing cranberry sauce around, trying not to look at the happy family beside me, trying not to think about my own family in Cleveland. Probably finishing dessert by now, probably not thinking about me at all. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about one Thanksgiving. This wasn't about Steven's stress or Rachel's pregnancy or Mom's need to keep the peace. This was about a pattern so deep, so ingrained, it had shaped every single moment of my life. 29 years of being the afterthought. 29 years of coming in second, third, last. 29 years of hearing, don't be so sensitive. Stop making everything about yourself. Why can't you just be happy for your brother? I'd spent nearly 3 decades shrinking myself into smaller and smaller shapes, thinking if I just needed less, if I just asked for less, if I just was less, maybe then I'd finally be enough for them. And what did I have to show for it? A corner table. A meal I was eating alone. An Instagram photo with no empty chair. The tears came before I could stop them. I turned my face toward the window, tried to be invisible, tried to disappear the way I always did. But I couldn't stop shaking, son. I froze. A man's voice, deep and warm and concerned. You all right there? I looked up. The older man from the family next to me was standing beside my table. He had kind eyes, silver hair, the sort of face that looked like it had spent a lifetime actually listening to people. I'm fine, I said automatically, the lie I'd been telling my whole life. Just allergies. He raised an eyebrow, gentle but knowing. Allergies don't usually hit on Thanksgiving, son. I let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. That obvious? Only to someone paying attention. He glanced back at his table, then at me. I'm Robert. Robert Chen. Isaac. I wiped my eyes with my napkin. Robert Chen studied me for a moment, then made a decision. Nobody should eat alone today. Why don't you join us? I shook my head immediately. Oh no, I couldn't. I don't want to intrude on your family. You're not intruding. I'm inviting. There's a difference. I really appreciate it, but I don't want to make things weird. My wife makes the world's worst jokes. Robert continued like I hadn't spoken. And my son David never stops arguing about politics. You might as well come suffer with us. From the big table, the older woman, his wife presumably, waved at me with a warm smile. The younger son, David, called out, he's not kidding about Mom's jokes. Fair warning. I looked at my cold turkey. I looked at my empty table. I looked at Robert Chen and his open, honest face, offering me something I hadn't felt in years, a place to belong. Okay, I heard myself say. If you're really sure. I'm sure. Robert's smile widened. Come on. There's always room for one more. I stood up on unsteady legs and followed him to his table, not knowing that this single moment, this one act of kindness from a stranger, was about to change the entire trajectory of my life. They made space for me like I'd been part of the plan all along. Someone grabbed an extra chair. Someone else slid down to make room. Before I could process what was happening, I had a full plate in front of me and a glass of wine in my hand. This is my wife, Margaret, Robert said, gesturing to the silver-haired woman who'd waved earlier. Our son David and his wife Jennifer, their kids Ashley and Marcus, and our youngest, James. Hi, I managed, giving an awkward half-wave to the table. I'm Isaac. Thanks for letting me crash your Thanksgiving. You're not crashing anything, Margaret said warmly. We're happy to have you. So what do you do, Isaac? David asked, passing me the stuffing. I'm a software developer. Freelance, mostly. That's great, Jennifer said. I can barely figure out Excel. Marcus, one of the teenagers, perked up. Do you do game development? A little bit. I've worked on a few indie games. His eyes lit up. That's so cool. What kind? Before I knew it, I was having an actual conversation. About work, about games, about Chicago winters and the best pizza places and whether deep dish actually counted as pizza. Nobody asked me why I was alone. Nobody made me feel like a charity case. They just talked to me like I was supposed to be there. Like I mattered. And then Robert raised his glass. A toast, he announced. The table quieted. To unexpected blessings. To the people who show up when we need them. To family however we find it. Everyone raised their glasses, including me. And as I looked around at these strangers who'd invited me into their warmth, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt wanted. After dinner, while the kids went to play an ancient arcade game in the corner and the men argued about football, Margaret moved to the chair beside mine. You doing okay? She asked quietly. Better, I admitted. This is really kind of you all. She smiled. You want to tell me why you were really here alone? I hesitated, but something about her made me want to be honest. The same something that had made Robert notice me crying in the first place. My mom called 3 days ago, I said slowly. Told me not to come home. My brother's wife is pregnant and she didn't want drama. Drama? That's what they call it. When I ask questions they don't want to answer. Margaret nodded slowly, no judgment in her expression. I see, it's fine, I added quickly. I mean, it's not fine, but it's not new. This is just how it's always been. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Can I tell you something I learned in 40 years as a family therapist? You're a therapist? Retired, she sipped her wine. I've worked with every kind of family you can imagine. And I've learned that the people who accuse you of being dramatic are usually the ones creating the drama. They just need someone to blame. The words hit me like a physical force. You're not the problem, Isaac. Margaret put her hand over mine. You never were. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Nobody had ever said that to me. Not once in 29 years. Hey, I need you to pause here for a second. If you've ever been the scapegoat, if you've ever been blamed for causing problems, just because you asked to be treated with basic respect, I need you to know something. It's not you. It never was. Type SC in the comments if you've been the scapegoat. I read every single comment, and I want you to know you're not alone. Now let me tell you what happened next. Because this is where everything started to change. The evening wound down slowly, the way the best nights do. More pie appeared. Coffee was poured. The kids eventually fell asleep with their heads on the table, exhausted from running around. When the check came, I reached for my wallet. But Robert waved me off before I could even pull out my card. Absolutely not, he said firmly. This one's on us. I can't let you pay for my meal. You can and you will, he smiled. Consider it a tradition. We always buy dinner for new friends. As everyone gathered coats and started the slow process of leaving, Margaret pressed something into my hand. A business card, cream-colored with simple black text. Margaret Chen, Ph.D., Family Psychology, retired. Below that, a phone number and an address in Lincoln Park. If you ever need to talk, she said, call me. I mean that. Thank you. My voice came out rough. For everything. Robert appeared beside us, helping Margaret with her coat. Sunday dinner's at our place, he said casually. Every week. You should come. I shook my head. That's really generous, but I couldn't just show up to your family dinners. Why not? James, the younger son, joined the conversation. Mom and Dad are always feeding random people. It's kind of their thing. Margaret isn't kidding when she says you're welcome, David added. She never says things she doesn't mean. Trust me, Margaret squeezed my hand. Family isn't just blood, Isaac. It's showing up. I stood there in the diner lobby, holding a business card from a woman I'd met 4 hours ago, receiving an open invitation from a family I had zero claim to. Outside Chicago was dark and cold. Through the window, I could see families heading to their cars, parents carrying sleeping children, grandparents walking slowly with arms linked. I looked back at the Chens, Robert smiling warmly, Margaret with those knowing, kind eyes, David and his family already heading out, James waiting by the door. Maybe I will, I said. Come to dinner sometime. Margaret smiled like she'd known. I would say yes all along. Good, we'll see you Sunday. I had no idea I'd just met my future family. I didn't go the next Sunday, or the one after that. It felt too strange, too presumptuous, too much like I was forcing my way into someone else's life. But Margaret called me. "Just checking in," she said. "No pressure. Just wanted to make sure you're doing okay." We talked for an hour. About nothing. About everything. By mid-December, I finally accepted the invitation. I stood on the Chen family's porch in Lincoln, parked for a full 7 minutes before I found the courage to knock. The house was exactly what I'd imagined. A beautiful brick brownstone, with a wreath on the door and warm light, glowing in every window. It looked like the kind of place where good things happened. Margaret opened the door before I could change my mind and run. "Isaac," she pulled me into a hug like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We've been waiting for you." That was the first of many Sundays. Over the next year, I became a regular at the Chen dinner table. Robert taught me to play chess, even though I lost every single game. Margaret showed me her recipe for the perfect apple pie, the one she'd learned from her grandmother in Taiwan. David's kids started calling me Uncle Isaac without anyone telling them to. And James became my best friend, the kind who texted at 2 a.m. with random thoughts, the kind who showed up at my apartment with coffee when I was stressed about a deadline, the kind who sat next to me at dinner every week without making it weird. I didn't hear from my biological family once, not at Christmas, not on my birthday, not ever. For the first time in my life, I stopped waiting for them to choose me. Because for the first time, I wasn't performing for love. I was just loved. One spring afternoon, about 14 months after that first Thanksgiving, I was sitting on the Chen's back porch with Margaret. The garden was starting to bloom, tulips pushing through the soil, birds everywhere. Robert and James were inside watching basketball and yelling at the TV. "Have you heard from your parents?" Margaret asked. "No. I watched a cardinal land on the fence, and I haven't reached out either. Do you want to?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. Sometimes, I admitted. Late at night, I'll think about calling my mom, trying to explain everything. But then I remember she knows what she did. She just doesn't think it was wrong. That's a hard truth to accept. It is. I pulled my jacket tighter. Everyone says you're supposed to forgive family no matter what. Blood is thicker than water, all that. Margaret set down her tea. "You know, I've never believed that saying." "What do you mean?" "I spent 40 years helping people navigate family trauma." She looked at me. "And I'll tell you what I told my clients. The full saying is actually the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means the bonds we choose are stronger than the ones we're born into." I stared at her. "I didn't know that." "Most people don't." She smiled gently. "But it's true. Family can be created, Isaac, not just inherited. And there are legal ways to make those bonds official, if that's something a person ever wanted." I didn't fully understand what she was hinting at. "Not yet, just something to think about," Margaret said. "Whenever you're ready." She changed the subject to her tomato plants. But her words stayed with me, taking root slowly, waiting for the right moment to bloom. It happened so naturally I almost didn't notice it happening. 3 years after that first Thanksgiving, James and I weren't just friends anymore. We were something more, something that had grown so gradually that when we finally acknowledged it, it felt less like a beginning and more like recognizing what had always been there. He asked me to dinner at Rosewood Diner, the same place where we'd first met. "This feels full circle," I said, sliding into a booth. "That's the idea." James was nervous. I could tell by the way he kept fidgeting with his napkin, adjusting his silverware, not quite meeting my eyes. "What's going on? Are you okay?" "I'm great, actually." He took a breath. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this for months." "Say what?" "Isaac, you're my best friend." He finally looked at me. "You've been my best friend since the day Mom dragged you over to our table. You were crying into your mashed potatoes and you looked so lost, and I knew." "Knew what?" "That you were supposed to be in my life." He reached across the table and took my hand. "I don't want to be just your friend anymore. I want to wake up next to you. I want to build a life with you. I want to choose you every single day for the rest of my life." My heart stopped. "James, I know your family hurt you. I know you're scared of people letting you down." His voice was steady, certain. "But I'm not going anywhere. I never have been. I'm not going to let you down." He pulled out a small box. "Isaac Carter, will you marry me?" I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. I looked at this man who'd been my friend first, my anchor second, my home always. This man who'd never once made me feel like too much or too little. Who'd chosen me, consistently, without hesitation, for 3 years. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes." He slipped the ring on my finger, and the diner erupted in applause. I'd been so focused on James I hadn't noticed the other diners watching. And then I saw them. In the corner booth, Robert and Margaret, champagne already on the table, beaming at us like they'd known all along. Mom couldn't resist. James laughed, standing up to hug his parents. I was officially going to become a Chen. The wedding planning started immediately. Venues, caterers, cake tastings, flower consultations. It was overwhelming and exciting and everything I'd never let myself dream about. But one question kept me awake at night. On the wedding invitation, there's a line for parents of the groom. I had no idea what to write. Robert and Linda Carter, my biological parents. We hadn't spoken in over 3 years. They hadn't called for my birthday, hadn't acknowledged my existence. I couldn't put their names on my invitation. They hadn't earned that honor. I was pacing Margaret's living room when she found me one afternoon. "What's bothering you, sweetheart?" I told her about the invitation dilemma, about the impossible line I couldn't figure out how to fill. Margaret sat down and patted the couch beside her. "Do you remember what I told you about chosen family? About how the law can recognize those bonds?" I nodded slowly. "Adult adoption," she said gently. "It's a legal process where a consenting adult is formally adopted by another family. It creates a legal parent-child relationship. New birth certificate, new legal recognition, everything." My heart started pounding. "That's real, very real. I've helped several people through the process over the years." I looked at this woman who'd pulled me into her family on the loneliest night of my life, who'd fed me Sunday dinners and taught me about pie crust and shown me what a mother could actually be. "Margaret," I started, my voice shaking. Would you consider?" She pulled me into her arms before I could finish. "We've considered you our son since the first Thanksgiving," she whispered. "We were just waiting for you to be ready." The adoption process took 5 months. Paperwork, court appearances, legal filings. But with Margaret guiding me through every step, it felt less like bureaucracy and more like a ceremony, like I was finally making official what had been true in my heart for years. When the judge signed the final order, I legally became Isaac Chen. New birth certificate, new legal parents, new family on paper and in every way that mattered. The wedding was set for the following summer. We sent out invitations with a line I'd never thought I'd be able to write. Parents of the groom, Robert and Margaret Chen. Should have known the Carter family would eventually find out 4 months before the wedding. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I'd blocked years ago. I'd gotten a new phone and forgotten to transfer the block list. "Did you seriously get adopted? Like a child?" It was Stephen. I stared at the message for a full minute. Then I blocked the number and deleted the text. 2 days later, my mother called. 7 times in one afternoon. I let every call go to voicemail. Finally, a text appeared. "Why didn't you tell us you were getting married? We're your family. Call me back immediately." I read it twice. Then I turned off my phone. 3 years of silence. 3 years of acting like I didn't exist. And now, suddenly, they remembered they had another son. I wasn't angry. I'd moved past anger a long time ago. I was just tired. James found me staring out the window that evening. "They found out? Yeah, what do you want to do?" "Nothing." I leaned into him. "I don't owe them anything. Not an explanation, not an invitation, not even a response." He kissed the top of my head. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." But I knew this wasn't over. The Carters weren't the kind of family who accepted being ignored quietly. The question was, what would they do next? She showed up at my apartment on a Wednesday morning. I was working from home in the middle of a video call with a client when my doorbell rang 3 times in rapid succession. I muted my mic, went to the door, and made the mistake of opening it without checking the peephole. "Isaac." My mother stood in my hallway. She looked older than I remembered. More gray in her hair, new lines around her eyes. But the expression on her face was the same one I'd seen my entire childhood. Disappointment mixed with determination. "Mom." The word felt strange in my mouth. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" She pushed past me into my apartment without being invited. "What are you doing? Getting married without telling your own mother?" "We haven't spoken in 3 years," I said, closing the door. "And whose fault is that?" "Yours." I said it calmly, factually. "You told me not to come home. You chose Stephen over me, every single time for 29 years. That was one Thanksgiving, Isaac. You can't still be holding on to that." "I'm not holding on to anything." I looked at her steadily. "I've moved on." Linda's eyes swept across my living room, landing on the photos on my bookshelf. Me and James at the beach. Me and Margaret baking. The whole Chen family at Christmas. Me right in the center, laughing. "Who are these people?" "My family. I am your family." You were, I said. You chose not to be. Her face went red. I didn't raise you for 29 years just to be replaced by strangers. You didn't raise me to be your son, I said quietly. You raised me to be invisible, to not ask questions, to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you threw my way. And I'm done with that. I want an invitation to the wedding. No, excuse me. I walked to the door and opened it. You don't get to erase me for 3 years and then demand a seat at my table. That's not how this works. This is humiliating. Then leave. My voice was calm, final. You showed up uninvited. You don't get to be the victim here. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. The son who never fought back had finally learned to stand his ground. Fine, she said, her voice shaking. But don't come crying to me when your fake family lets you down. Margaret and Robert are more real than you ever were, I said. And they already adopted me. Legally. So no, Mom. You're not my family anymore. Not on paper, not in my heart, not in any way that matters. She left without another word. And I closed the door behind her, finally, permanently, on 29 years of trying to be enough for people who would never choose me. The wedding day arrived. Perfect and golden. We'd chosen a vineyard in Napa Valley, a compromised location since James's extended family was scattered across California. Rolling hills covered in grapevines, an outdoor ceremony with a stone terrace, a reception in a beautiful barn decorated with white flowers and soft lights. In the groom's suite, I stood in front of a mirror while James helped me with my tie. You look incredible, he said softly. I looked at my reflection. The man looking back was different. From the one who'd sat alone in a diner 5 years ago. That man had been broken, convinced he was unlovable, certain there was something fundamentally wrong with him. This man knew better. On the table beside me sat a copy of the wedding program. I picked it up, reading the line that still made my chest tight with emotion. Parents of the groom, Robert and Margaret Chen. Underneath, in smaller italics, the family who chose him. Are you nervous? James asked. About marrying you? No, I set down the program. About what might happen? A little. I'd hired security for the wedding, a quiet precaution. After my mother's visit, I knew there was a chance she'd try something. I just didn't know what. Margaret knocked and entered, elegant in a silver dress. Her eyes immediately filled with tears when she saw me. Oh, Isaac, you look so handsome. I hugged her tight, breathing in her familiar perfume. The scent of safety and home. Thank you, I said quietly. For everything. For choosing me when nobody else would. She pulled back, holding my face in her hands. We didn't choose you, sweetheart. We recognized you. You were always ours. We just had to wait for you to realize it. Through the window, I could see guests arriving. James's extended family, our friends, co-workers, the life we'd built together. Robert was already at the altar, looking proud and nervous. It was time. Whatever came next, I was ready. The ceremony was perfect. Robert walking me down the aisle, steady and present. James waiting at the end, tears already streaming down his face. The vows we'd written ourselves. Promises that made half the guests cry and the other half pretend. They weren't crying. When James slid the ring onto my finger and the officiant pronounced us married, I felt something lock into place. Like the final piece of a puzzle I'd been trying to solve my entire life. This was what choosing looked like. This was what being chosen felt like. The reception was in full swing. Dinner served, champagne flowing, when the security guard appeared at my elbow. Mr. Chen, he said quietly. There are 2 people at the entrance. They say they're your parents. My stomach dropped. James appeared beside me immediately. I'll handle it. No, I took his hand. I need to do this. I considered my options. I could have them removed. I could ignore them. I could avoid the confrontation entirely. But something in me said no. Let them see the family who showed up when they walked away. Let them witness the life I built without them. Let them understand finally what they threw away. Let them in, I told the security guard. But seat them in the back, away from family. Are you sure? James asked. I'm sure. A few minutes later I saw them. Robert and Linda Carter, standing awkwardly at the edge of the reception, looking around at the 150 people celebrating their son's wedding. The son they hadn't spoken to in 3 years. The son they'd uninvited from Thanksgiving because he caused drama. The MC stepped up to the microphone. The room quieted. Before we continue, I'd like to introduce some very special people. I watched my biological parents from across the room. Linda was straightening her dress, preparing herself. Robert looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to disappear. They thought this was their moment. Please welcome the parents of the groom, Robert and Margaret Chen." The room erupted in applause. Robert and Margaret stood from the head table, waving, accepting congratulations from guests who'd known them for years, who knew exactly who they were and what they meant to me. And across the room, my mother's face went white. I watched it happen. The confusion, the shock, the moment she realized what those words meant. Robert and Margaret Chen, not Carter Chen, the family who legally adopted their adult son because he needed parents and they were actually willing to be parents. To everyone at this wedding, Robert and Margaret were simply what they appeared to be, my mom and dad. Linda grabbed Robert Carter's arm. Her mouth moved, but I couldn't hear the words. He looked stunned, frozen. Around them, guests continued celebrating, completely unaware that the older couple in the back had any connection to the groom at all. They had been erased, completely. Officially, legally, Linda pushed through the crowd before anyone could stop her. She reached me just as the applause was fading, her face flushed, her eyes wild. Robert Carter trailed behind, looking like he wished the floor would open up and swallow him. "What is this?" Linda's voice was a harsh whisper. "Who are those people?" "My legal parents." I kept my voice steady. "I was adopted 2 years ago." "You what?" She actually stumbled backward. "You can't just replace us." "I didn't replace you," I said calmly. "You abandoned me. You chose Stephen and his family every single time for 29 years. The guests nearest to us had noticed something was wrong. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. "That's not true." Linda's voice shook. "That's one Thanksgiving, one birthday party, one graduation." I looked at her directly. 30 years of being invisible. And when I finally stopped trying to earn your love, you didn't even notice I was gone. Around us, more people were noticing. James moved to my side. Margaret appeared on my other side. Robert Chen stepped forward, protective. "You need to leave," Robert Chen said quietly but firmly. "Who are you to tell us anything?" Linda's voice rose. "I'm his father." Robert's voice was calm, absolute. "Legally and in every way that matters. You stole our son." "We didn't steal anything," Margaret said, her therapist voice coming out, measured and direct. "You threw him away." "We just gave him the family he deserved." Linda looked around wildly, suddenly aware that 150 people were watching this. Her face went even redder. "This is humiliating." "Then leave," I said softly. "You weren't invited. You don't get to show up and play victim." She opened her mouth. No words came out. Robert Carter cleared his throat, his voice breaking. "Isaac, I'm sorry." The same words he'd said 3 years ago on the phone. The same empty apology that changed nothing. "I know you're sorry, Dad." My voice was gentle. "But sorry doesn't undo 30 years of choosing Stephen over me. Sorry doesn't give me back my childhood. Sorry doesn't make this okay." I nodded to security who'd been waiting nearby. "Please escort them out." As the guards approached, I looked at both of them one last time. Goodbye. They were led toward the exit, and the reception fell silent. Then someone started clapping. One person, then another. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding. Not for the drama, for me, for choosing myself, for finally refusing to shrink. The rest of the reception was everything I'd dreamed of. Dancing with James until we were both dizzy, cutting the cake while everyone cheered. Robert Chen giving a toast that made me cry. Margaret pulling me aside to tell me how proud she was. For those few hours, I let myself forget the confrontation and just be happy. But the next morning, my phone exploded. Texts from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Messages from aunts and uncles I barely remembered. The extended Carter family had heard what happened, and they had opinions. How could you do that to your mother? Family is family no matter what. You broke your father's heart. I deleted them without responding. Then one text came through that made me stop. From my Uncle Dan, my dad's younger brother. "Isaac, I heard what happened. I want you to know I'm proud of you. I always knew Linda and Stephen treated you wrong. I tried saying something once, and your mom didn't speak to me for 2 years. But you deserve better. You always did." My eyes burned. I typed back, "Thank you. That means more than you know." On Facebook, Linda posted a long, dramatic status about ungrateful children and fake families who don't understand loyalty. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That evening, I blocked every phone number and social media account connected to the Carter family. Not out of anger. Out of peace. James found me on the balcony of our honeymoon suite, looking out at the Napa Valley sunset. "You okay?" "Yeah," I leaned into him. "I really am. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of people who'd never wanted to carry me. I was finally free. 1 year after the wedding, life had settled into something beautiful. James and I bought a house in Oak Park, a renovated craftsman with a big backyard, close enough to Robert and Margaret for Sunday dinners, but far enough for our own space. I'd left freelancing and taken a position as lead developer at a tech startup, a job I actually loved. James was thriving at his architecture firm. We were building a life, literally and figuratively. And then we got the call about adoption. Not for me this time, for a child. We'd been on the waiting list for 18 months. A 3-year-old boy named Eli, born to a mother who'd struggled with addiction and wanted better for her son than she could provide. The first time we met him, he looked at me with these huge brown eyes and said, "Are you gonna keep me?" "Forever," I promised. "If you'll have us." He nodded solemnly, then asked if we had snacks. We brought him home 3 months later. Margaret cried when she met him. Robert immediately started building him a treehouse. David's kids treated him like he'd always been their cousin. And Eli called us Dad and Daddy without anyone having to teach him. One Sunday afternoon, I was pushing Eli on the swing in Robert and Margaret's backyard while James and David argued about football inside. Margaret sat on the porch with a book watching us. Eli laughed as the swing went higher, his joy so pure and uncomplicated it made my chest ache. "Do you ever think about them?" Margaret asked when Eli ran off to explore the garden. "Your biological parents?" "Sometimes." I sat down beside her, late at night mostly. "I wonder if they ever understood what they lost." "Do you think they did?" I shook my head. "People rarely change, not in the ways that matter." "Does that make you sad?" I looked at Eli, crouched in the dirt examining a beetle with complete fascination. "It used to, but not anymore. I have too much to be grateful for. My life is too full." Margaret smiled. "What changed?" I did. I looked at her. I stopped waiting for them to love me the way I needed. I stopped making myself smaller to fit into their idea of who I should be. And I started building something new. Through the window, I could see the family, my family, James and David laughing. Robert showing Eli's new drawings to anyone who would look. This warmth, this belonging, this unconditional acceptance. "You know what I learned?" I said quietly. "Setting boundaries isn't revenge. It's survival. It's choosing yourself when nobody else will." Margaret squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you survived." "Me too." Eli ran back over, covered in dirt, holding up the beetle proudly. "Dad, look! I caught him!" "That's amazing, buddy." I pulled him onto my lap, dirt and all. "You're so brave." "Am I gonna live with you forever?" he asked. The question he'd asked at least once a week since he'd arrived, like he still couldn't quite believe it was real. "Forever and ever," I promised. "You're ours now. We're never letting you go." He hugged me tight, his small arms around my neck. And I thought about the boy I used to be. The one who'd sat alone at a diner, convinced he was fundamentally unlovable. The one who'd spent 29 years trying to earn a place at a table that would never have room for him. That boy had no idea that 5 years later, he'd be sitting in a garden with a son of his own, surrounded by a family that chose him first, that chose him always, that never once made him doubt he belonged. If you're watching this and you've been the invisible child, if you've been told you're too sensitive or too dramatic, just because you dared to ask for basic respect, I need you to hear something. It's not you. It never was. You deserve to be chosen, not as a backup, not as an afterthought, not as the acceptable sacrifice when someone else needs peace. Chosen first, chosen fully, chosen without conditions. Family isn't blood. Family isn't obligation. Family isn't people who share your DNA but treat you like a burden. Family is the people who show up. The people who see you crying alone and invite you to their table. The people who open their homes and their hearts and their legal documents to make you officially, permanently, undeniably theirs. I spent 29 years trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it. Then I spent 5 years learning what love actually looks like. Not from the family I was born into, but from the family that chose me. You have the right to build your own family. You have the right to walk away from people who don't choose you. You have the right to be happy. That's not revenge. That's not drama. That's just living your life without people who never deserved a seat at your table. I found my people, and if you're still looking for yours, I promise you they're out there. Keep your heart open. Keep choosing yourself. Keep believing you deserve better, because you do. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, leave SC in the comments for scapegoat. I want to know you're out there. I want you to know you're not alone. And if you've found your chosen family, tell me about them. Tell me how they chose you. Tell me what it felt like to finally belong. Remember, you deserve to be chosen. And somewhere out there, your real family is waiting to find you too.